All right. So as we've talked about today, we're focusing on just cideries and meaderies, which I am already taking bets against myself as to when I'll finally screw up those two words at some point. But because, right, it's not beer, it's not wine, it's something in the middle. So first of all, let's explain cideries and meaderies and the differences between them. Eric?
Between cider and mead?
Between cider and mead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, all of this is a mixture of distillation and fermentation. Mm-hmm. Really fermentation more than anything.
You know that I left you a bunch of notes, right?
Yeah, I'm looking at them right now.
Okay, good. Just making sure. You did your own research. I'm making sure. Sorry.
So fermentation is the name of the game with all of these things, right? Beer is fermented grains. Wine is fermented grapes. Spirits are fermented grains of various kinds. Mm-hmm. Mead is just fermented honey. Mm-hmm. And cider is essentially fermenting fruit.
Right.
So it all involves fermentation. It's just what is your source.
Yeah.
So mead, fermenting honey, is considered probably the oldest alcoholic drink that was consistently made in the world. Mm-hmm. It goes way back to ancient times. I mean, way before beer, way before wine. And Vikings loved mead.
Oh, yeah.
Which means it's a great thing to drink when you're going to set out on the shores and... pillage and all that stuff. It's great. If you want to win Super Bowls, not so great.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, my God.
Now, just like wines, mead can range from very sweet to very dry, and it all depends on the process where it's done. Similar to cider, cider is basically fermented apple juice. I mean, and it's funny because some of the creatures that love to feed on apples, including sometimes bees, like with honey and apples.
Yeah.
If there's enough sun and those sugars convert and they ferment, the bees get drunk.
Yeah.
Really?
And yeah.
Oh my God.
Actually, and I learned this, because bees are constantly, they're making the honey, they're eating apples, they're eating all these other things. And so oftentimes bees will get hammered and then fly back to the hive. And apparently in a lot of hives, there's literally like a bouncer bee that hangs out at the hive because they don't let drunk bees in.
Go home, Johnny, you're
drunk. So they literally will not let you back in the hive. So I'm just trying to figure out if there's this bouncer bee who's got the big shoulders and he's like, Murr, in front of some little bee velvet rope kind of thing.
Oh my God. What a visual you have.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure
here.
I've seen a funny video of a squirrel getting really drunk.
Oh, they do that too because they'll eat apples off the ground.
I think pumpkins too.
Oh, pumpkins.
Pumpkins will ferment. And,
yeah. Well, everything ferments a little.
Yeah.
So
after a while,
bread too. I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
So
I don't think you want to eat that bread.
Yeah. That's very true. Yeah, there was a lot of trial and error throughout history of humankind trying to figure out what works or not.
That's why we've become the smart, adaptive creatures we are today.
Indeed. So, for example, for making cider, they basically just press apples. They press the juice out. They put it in a large container. Sometimes they add yeast. There's a little bit of natural yeast already in apples, but sometimes they add more for some specialties. Once it ferments, which it just does naturally, sometimes they add sugar. And sometimes it carbonates. You'll have sparkling cider, which is wonderful. And so there's a lot of different ways in the process you can affect it. But the basis of how it starts is remarkably similar.
Yeah.
Now, there's also ciders made from pear, which that's one of the specialties of one of the cideries I'm going to mention a little later. Some people are purists. Oh, cider's only from apples. Well, it can be from pears too, and we're making it. The traditional name for cider made from pears is Perry.
Not to be confused with a Perrier.
Or a Katy Perry. So
okay.
Now, ciders range in alcohol similar to beers. Some are pretty low, 1.2% ABV, all the way up to 12%. You're getting up there then.
Yeah.
Meads are a little more. They range about 8% on up to 20%.
Because they drink more like a wine.
They drink more like a wine, and honey starts with a higher sugar content to begin with. So there's more fermentation.
Oh, right. Okay, so serious question about this. Obviously, they both sound delicious and wonderful, but I feel like it's been a pretty recent thing that they've gotten so popular
they've
again.
Exploded just lately.
Seriously, which is kind of the premise of this episode, because we're like,
That's why we're paying attention to it.
Yeah, there's so many of them. Do we know why?
Precisely why, I'm not sure.
Okay.
I can tell you that there's everybody loves bringing old school stuff back.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think the name Walter's so
Mead
popular?
I know, Walter
Or
and
my name.
Stanley.
What?
It's crazy.
Yeah. The Walters, the Stanleys, the Esters, Blanche,
Esther's coming back?
Gladys.
Wow.
Gladys is coming back?
No
Have you
way.
have you even
Seriously?
heard have you heard of the trend that's happening a lot right now, and it's called Grand Millennial?
That would be you, though, wouldn't it? Oh, no, you're not even a
First of
millennial.
all, I am a millennial.
Are you?
Yes.
Okay.
But and a lot of Gen Z is doing it too, where it's really just grabbing your grandparents' style and like putting that back in your home. Like the super ultra modern that was in for a while
Yeah.
is officially kind of on its way back out. Which, honest, I mean, everything circles around at some point. So maybe it has something to do
so
with that.
cabin aesthetic is well timed.
Yeah, I
Really
guess
hanging out.
so.
But I'm
Does
thinking
that go along
like
with my strategy of holding on to clothes until they're in fashion again?
Absolutely.
Because I still have my acid wash jeans from the Depeche Mode concert in
I mean,
1990.
look at all of the 90s things that have already
Yeah.
come back. Just like this last 2 years that came back for super popularity. Okay, so I'm just wondering.
Meaderies.
So
Meaderies.
So what you just heard is a tangent, but we'll bring it
Well,
back
no,
by
but
pointing out a
I
key
think
thing.
all of that's part of it. It all cycles
Right.
back.
You're mentioning like a lot of people want to outfit their homes like their grandparents' homes
Yes.
were. And that means in the cabinet, you have
Yeah.
cider and mead
Yeah.
and Blatz. But that's
Because it
another story.
also stop it. Because it also was originally so cider in particular, not really meads, but cider was the big drink during colonial times.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yes, and one of the things that they've noticed, like, well, for example, like Samuel Adams, which is actually the Boston Beer Company,
Right.
they make their beers, and to harken back to Boston's history, which Boston was quite pivotal in colonial times, they were starting to bring back some ciders, and suddenly the big beer companies are realizing that. So that's how you know it's officially a trend.
Okay.
Like, it's officially a trend so much that maybe the people that started drinking it in advance stopped already.
Yeah.
Because that's too. Now everybody knows about it. It's not cool anymore. But ciders are growing like crazy. And basically, really for about the past 10 years, there's over 1,000 cideries that have opened across the country, really in all 50 states. But basically, in Wisconsin, where we have, and especially in terms of cider and mead, we have a lot of bees.
Okay.
We have a lot of apples. I mean, there's several cities that love to have
hope
apple festivals, from Gays Mills to Bayfield and more, Galesville, big apple festival. So, I mean, we're a pretty big producer of the things that help produce cider and mead. So Wisconsin is on its, basically Wisconsin's on maybe even ahead of the trend a little bit.
Yeah, and
this
as
stuff.
we were researching this list of wineries or cideries and meaderies, it's really interesting. There are some very large established operations. There's also, you look up like who's making cider and mead in Wisconsin, you'll see pictures of people who don't even have a website, and they just have like a table in their garage of a couple tanks.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's a very accessible
doesn't
thing to do on a
seem
small scale too,
trustworthy to me.
which is cool.
Well, that's one of the neat things. Cider and mead's a lot easier to make than beer.
Yeah.
Now you can get more into the complex styles and have specialties and everything, but almost anybody can make a rudimentary cider or mead. A lot of people actually are making kombucha too.
Oh yeah.
And,
does
'cause
kombucha-
Anne's made kombucha, and she said one of her batches exploded, so she's being a little more careful. But
Does
so
that really
we should
fit
address
into
kombucha.
I was going to say
Because
because
a lot of people automatically think, well, what about that?
Yeah.
I was going to say I don't think that would fit in this category because it's
It
not
doesn't.
traditionally alcoholic.
Right, it's more of a tea in a way.
It is more of a, like it is a fermented
Fermented,
tea,
yeah.
but it's not meant to get you drunk,
Yeah.
right?
Or relaxed. We like to use relaxed.
Sure, because usually the APV for that is like under 0.5%,
Yeah.
if
You
anything.
can get like hard kombuchas. That,
Right,
But
and
you
that
have
actually
to
does
make it
have
hard.
Yeah.
Rather than to have a non-alcoholic cider and mead, you'd have to filter the alcohol out.
Right, exactly.
So, and yeah, kombucha forms from fermenting herbal tea and bacteria and yeast. So, so we wanted to address kombucha because every time I talk about mead and cider, people bring it up, and it's like that's cool, but it doesn't belong in this category.
Right,
So,
exactly.
and there aren't kombucheries. Is that what it would be called?
Kombucheries.
A place that
Kombuchery.
specializes in kombucha.
I like it.
Oh, wait a minute!
if
Did I
that's
just
not what it's
invent a new?
called, but-
Did I just invent a new product category?
I hope so.
Did
might
you?
Kombucheries.
Eric, there you go. There's your next $1 million
Welcome
idea.
to episode 207, Wisconsin's Kombucheries. I'm just getting practice for the year 2023.
Just putting that on tape so we
I
can
may have
reuse it
started
later.
a trend. I
Perfect.
want evidence I created this.
You want proof of intellectual property.
Yes.
You're marking it here.
I will
we
trademark
understand.
it tomorrow.